They say small towns are safe. They say everyone knows everyone and nothing bad ever happens. But when the sun sets over Hollow Creek, silence becomes a predator and the shadows whisper names that no one dares to repeat aloud. This isn't a story about finding peace. It's a story about what finds you when you're looking for it. The bus rolled into Hollow Creek just after dusk, its headlights slicing through the mist that clung to the narrow streets. Emily Carter pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, staring at the rows of shuttered houses and dim, lonely street lamps. She'd come here to escape the relentless chaos of the city, to find a sliver of peace in a quiet, forgotten corner of the world. But peace was the last thing Hollow Creek had to offer. When the bus hissed to a stop, the driver didn't say a word. He just opened the door and stared straight ahead. As Emily stepped off, the air hit her. It was heavy, damp, and had a strange metallic tang, as if the town itself was exhaling rust and decay. Across the street, a single neon sign flickered above a diner, its tired light painting the mist in a sickly green glow. It read, "Welcome to Hollow Creek." The W buzzed and sputtered, on the verge of giving up, threatening to plunge the street into complete darkness. That's when she felt it, a prickling on the back of her neck. The feeling of being watched. It wasn't coming from the few townsfolk shuffling along the sidewalks, their heads bowed. It was coming from the houses, from the dark windows. She saw curtains shift just for a second, and the dark shapes of silhouettes pulling back into the shadows. An unspoken warning hung in the air, thicker than the fog. Seeking refuge from the unsettling quiet, Emily pushed open the door to the diner. The smell of burnt coffee and old fried grease clung to everything. A waitress with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed to have seen too much slid a menu across the counter without a single word. The silence was deafening. Emily ordered a sandwich, her own voice sounding loud and out of place. The waitress leaned in close, her voice a dry, cracking whisper that barely disturbed the air. "You shouldn't be here after dark." Emily frowned, confused. Why not? The waitress's eyes darted nervously towards the window, then back to Emily. "Because the town remembers," she hissed. "And it doesn't forgive." Before Emily could ask what she meant, the lights in the diner flickered violently. The low, steady hum of the neon sign outside abruptly died, plunging the diner into near-total blackness. For a moment, the silence was absolute, a heavy blanket smothering every sound. And then, from the street outside, a low, guttural noise began to rise. It was a sound that made the hairs on Emily's arms stand up. It wasn't animal, and it definitely wasn't human. Driven by a mix of fear and a dangerous curiosity, Emily pushed the diner door open and stepped back outside. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. The streets were completely empty now, yet the sound persisted. It was a dragging, scraping noise, like heavy, sharp nails clawing across the rough pavement. It was coming from the edge of town, where the road dissolved into the black maw of the forest. She followed it, moving cautiously through the shadows. There, just beneath the skeletal fingers of the first trees, she saw it. A figure, hunched and horribly twisted, its limbs far too long, its head cocked at an unnatural, broken angle. It moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, dragging something heavy and dark behind it. Emily couldn't make out what it was, but the shape was horribly familiar. Her breath hitched in her throat, a tiny, betraying gasp. The figure froze. Instantly, its head snapped toward her with an impossible speed. Though the shadows completely concealed its face, she felt its gaze lock onto her, a physical force that seemed to pierce straight through her soul. She didn't wait to see more. She turned and ran, the sound of her own frantic footsteps echoing in the empty, waiting streets of Hollow Creek. The next morning, it was as if the night had never happened. The sun painted the town in warm, golden light. Children rode their bikes down the street, their laughter echoing cheerfully. Shopkeepers were unlocking their doors, waving to neighbors. Emily stood on the sidewalk, the bright morning light feeling like a lie. She almost convinced herself she had imagined it all a bad dream brought on by a new, strange place, until she walked past the hardware store. She overheard two men talking in low, hushed tones. Another one gone, one of them muttered, his face grim. Same as before, the other replied, not looking up from the nail bin he was sorting, dragged off into the woods. Sheriff won't say a word, just like always. A cold knot formed in Emily's stomach. She stepped into the store, approaching the cashier. Trying to keep her voice steady, she asked what the men had meant. The cashier just gave her a flat, empty look and shook his head. Best not to ask questions around here, he said, his voice void of any emotion. Best not to stay long. Emily went straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dalton was a broad-shouldered man with tired, weary eyes that looked like they carried the weight of the whole town. When Emily pressed him about the disappearances, about what she'd seen at the edge of the woods, he let out a long, heavy sigh. Hollow Creek has a history, he said, his voice low and gravelly. Back in the 1800s, this was a booming mining town. But men started going down into the earth and just not coming back. Folks started saying the mine was cursed. That something lived down there, something ancient that fed on fear. He leaned closer across his desk, his gaze intense. We sealed that mine up decades ago, but the thing, it never left. That evening, the sound returned. It was louder this time, closer. Emily was in her small motel room, and she quickly barricaded the door with a flimsy chair. The scraping noise circled the building, a horrifying, patient predator. It dragged across the thin walls, pausing for a long, agonizing moment right at her window. She squeezed her eyes shut, pulling the covers over her head, forcing herself not to look. But then came the whisper, her name. It wasn't just in her head. It was a wet, broken sound seeping through the glass of the window as if spoken through a mouth full of soil and gravel. Emil, ye, she screamed, a raw, primal sound of pure terror. By dawn, Emily's fear had hardened into a desperate resolve. She wasn't going to be another whispered story in this town. She had to know what this thing was. She ventured into the forest, the same one from the first night. The tall, ancient trees loomed over her like silent, watchful sentinels, their branches clawing at the pale morning sky. She found it, the old mine entrance, hidden behind a thicket of thorns. It was sealed with rotting wooden boards and heavy, rusted chains. But the boards were splintered and broken. The chains had been snapped, their links twisted like wire. The darkness inside seemed to breathe, and the air that flowed out was thick with the smell of decay and damp earth. Hesitantly, she stepped inside, using her phone's flashlight to cut through the oppressive blackness. The walls of the mine shaft were covered in carvings, names, hundreds of them, etched deep into the stone. Some were faded, centuries old, others looked disturbingly fresh. Her light drifted across the wall, and then it stopped. Her blood ran cold. Scratched crudely into the stone, looking as if it had just been clawed there, was her own name, Emily. She fled from the mine, stumbling back to the town, her mind reeling. She needed help. She needed to get out. But as she ran down the main street, the town had changed. The friendly morning smiles were gone. The townsfolk didn't meet her eyes. They actively crossed the street to avoid her. She saw them whispering behind their hands as she passed, their faces a mixture of pity and fear. She burst into the diner, desperate. The same waitress was there, wiping the counter. This time, when she saw Emily, she spoke. "It's chosen you," she said, her voice flat, matter of fact. Once it calls your name, there's no leaving Hollow Creek. Emily's hands trembled uncontrollably. What is it? What is this thing? A grim, humorless smile touched the waitress's lips. It's the town itself, she said softly. Hollow Creek isn't quiet. It's hungry. The sun set that evening in a blaze of blood red and orange. Emily threw her things into her bag, her only thought to get to the bus station to catch the next bus out, no matter where it was going. But when she got there, the station was empty, the bus was gone. The driver stood alone under the flickering depot light, shaking his head slowly. "No one leaves once it begins," he said, not even looking at her, and then it started. The scraping sound echoing down the empty street, closer than ever. All around her, windows slammed shut, doors were bolted. The entire town vanished inside their homes, leaving Emily completely alone in the growing darkness. From the shadows at the end of the street, the figure emerged. It shambled into the dim light, dragging its heavy burden. And this time, Emily saw what it carried. A body. Her body? She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. A silent, horrified gasp was all she could manage. The figure stopped just feet from her and dropped the corpse at her feet. It was identical to her in every single detail: her clothes, her hair, her face, frozen in a mask of terror, her eyes wide and lifeless. From the windows of the houses, she could see the faces of the townsfolk, watching, silent, waiting. The figure leaned in close, its presence a wave of cold, damp earth. It whispered in her ear, the sound a mix of rustling leaves and cracking bones. Quiet small town, quiet forever. And then, every light in Hollow Creek went out. Weeks later, a new stranger arrived in town. They stepped off the evening bus, their face full of hope, looking for peace and a new beginning. From behind their curtains, the townsfolk watched. In the distance, a single neon sign flickered, sputtered, and waited. The town was always waiting. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy stories that get under your skin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales from the shadows. Let me know in the comments what you think is really haunting Hollow Creek. Until next time, stay safe